Welcome, everybody, to the School of Kingdom podcast. This is where you can enjoy thought-provoking conversations centered around the King and his kingdom. And this is a special episode because we are actually getting a twofer here with my good friend, podcaster, filmmaker, author, the Jason L. Clark. What's up, man?
Hey, man, you just dropped the filmmaker on me. That's fun. Twofer. We're doing Rethinking God with Tacos as well. And
yes.
Man, it's good to be here. It's good to be talking to you. You've become a very big part of my life, bro.
Yeah, it's been great, man.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we've had such a natural camaraderie.
Yeah.
And I remember even, I'm all about, and even School of Kingdom is about producing kingdom reformers upon the earth. And the very first time that we connected over video, you came on the screen, you had reformer on your hat, and I was like, we're going to be friends.
And we've traveled together now. So when you travel together, you get to know each other pretty good. And now we're doing like legit travel. Australia's coming.
Our first international gig, man. Going to be in Australia. Let's see, we'll be in Melbourne. I believe the November 7th will be the meeting there. And then in Sydney on Saturday, November 9th. And you can follow dubbalexander.com to keep up with all the details as all of that rolls out. We just got that locked in. Literally got your plane tickets for that yesterday.
Yes.
And so, finishing formulating what those events are looking like and all of that with the team. But I bet by the time this comes out, all the details will be up, and I'm excited, man.
I am too.
You haven't been to Australia yet, correct?
I've not. So I know we're going to put shrimp on the Barbie and a few other things. I know the cliches, right? Does the water really go down the toilet the opposite way there? I'm looking forward to finding out.
I've been there a couple of times. I never thought to look, man. But
I'll make sure that if it's true, I'll make sure we capture it.
For sure. That probably needs to be a Facebook Live.
Yeah. I will say this, bro. Seriously, I am excited about that. I've loved having you in my life, poured into my family, into my kids, and we've gotten to connect a little bit with each other's families. Truly, truly thankful for you. I mean, really, it really has been immediate, and I feel like I've known you for years, but love what you're doing in all seriousness, the impact, the way that you live. We did a Rethinking God with Tacos, our first conference. You emceed it. That was last month already. My goodness, a month ago. Life and light and wonder and connection. We've had incredible opportunities just to get to know each other. And so this is fun, bro. Honored to be doing life with you, and School of Kingdom podcast and Rethinking God with Tacos, all the ways that the worlds are blending.
Yes, sir.
Stuff.
Man, likewise, and right back at you on all counts, my friend, for sure. You've got an amazing family, and dude, it's been fun, and I'm excited about what's to come.
Amen. Amen.
For sure.
What's on your heart, bro?
Well, man, it's all about conversations centered around the King and his kingdom. And I know that you and I both have a history. We've done some time in the kind of charismatic kingdom streams. And both of us have experienced some pretty radical shifts in our theology, and specifically surrounding how we view the nature of the King. And I would love for you to share with us what your journey has been like in that regard.
Yeah, so brief history for folks that maybe aren't familiar. I'm like a fourth generation. There's been pastors that go back at least four that we can count, and very much a part of that charismatic Pentecostal stream. My grandmother, talk about a forerunner. My grandmother went into the interior of British Columbia as a missionary in her 30s, in her 20s and 30s. My grandfather with her was a school teacher, and I was looking through some old pictures the other day, and I saw both of them being pulled for real by dogs and sled so they could get into the interior and minister to particularly the Native Americans that were looking for the gospel, just to preach the gospel. So, man, I come from a beautiful history of lovers of Jesus who in many ways were pioneers and forerunners, and all of them discovering the love of God, right? Discover. So I'll tell you my favorite story. My grandmother, so my dad's mom, who I just told you about, my grandmother who was going into the interior, she died when he was 5.
Mm.
And my grandfather called back to the Bible college that he had gone to some 20 years earlier, graduated from, and he'd had a girl that he'd proposed to who said, "No, I'm called to the ministry." And so he called her up and he said, "My wife's died and I have 4 kids and they need a mom."
Wow.
And long story short, my dad got a new mom at the age of 5. Her name is Eva Watson Clark, and my daughter's named after her. But my cousin tells the story of my grandmother in her late 70s, 80s at a church service, and she went every week. She went twice, 3, 4 times a week. And she's in this service, and the Come Thou Fount, the song Come Thou Fount,
Oh yeah.
uh, is the song that they're worshiping to. And she she gets stubborn, she gets stoic. And my cousin Jonathan, I heard this story while I was writing my book Prone to Love, looking for the title. And I hear this story. She's stoic and stubborn, and she won't participate in the song. My cousin gets concerned, and he leans over and he says, "Grandma, what's wrong?" And that song has a phrase, "Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it."
Mm.
He hadn't caught that she wasn't participating in that part of the song. And so
Wow.
she says to him, "I'm not prone to wander, Jonathan. I love him."
Come on.
And when I heard that story, I heard my family legacy in it. You ask the journey's been one of discovering over and over his goodness, who he truly is and who we truly are in him, even when it's offensive. We were raised believing we were prone to wander. Uh, and my grandmother discovered at 80, it's not true.
Come on.
It was passed along to my folks came into that awakening in their 50s. I got it in my 30s, and my kids got it in their formative years. This is the journey that we're on. This is one of discovering and rediscovering and passing along to the generations the goodness of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And that's probably a way of telling my story. I'm still in the middle of it, man. Like, can we have a better thought about who he is today than we did yesterday? And can we lean into the perfection of his love for us tomorrow, knowing it's more expansive than it is today?
Yeah, so good. I've
Yeah.
heard you say several times this phrase that really stuck with me because it was so much a part of my journey as well. That the age when desperation was the high water mark
Yeah.
of belief or the kingdom, et cetera. Talk to us a little bit about that idea and what's shifted since then out of desperation into.
Yeah, man. But to some point, you got to yes and me.
Oh yeah, I shall.
We're going to do that. I got to hear what you're thinking, man. The goodness of God. I know you're interviewing me, so I'll answer that question, but then I'll pass the torch.
Yeah, man.
But if you grew up in the charismatic church, and I know that you and I have some similarities there, and you've probably touched on you've got different story as well, but for me, in the charismatic or Pentecostal church, desperation was the high watermark of spiritual maturity.
Mm.
So, the person that was most desperate in the room was probably the most holy, and of course, built upon even though I knew that there's no shadow of turning in the nature of Jesus, because I'd met him at 5 and I'd grown up in the culture of his affection. My parents stewarded that well. I still lived in the context of separation when going to church on a Sunday morning. That was being presented from the pulpit, and so if you're raised in the context of separation, but you understand intimacy and union because you've experienced it, then you're constantly doing mental gymnastics around his goodness. You're constantly living in this bipolar world, and in that world, desperation for his presence, desperation for his miracles, desperation for the prophetic, desperation. Who could pray the longest? Who could wear out the carpet? Who could call heaven down? All the language was still about getting God to come and it was connected to how desperate I was. My love song, and the beautiful thing about our Father is he meets us in the language. He meets us in our understanding. He speaks to us in the language of our understanding. And so one of my love songs was that worship song, and I am desperate for you, you know.
Oh yeah.
That was my love song for in my 20s, and I was a worship leader, and I encountered his affection over and over and over again. But the journey he was taking me into was one in which ultimately, and I discovered it easily as a parent, that ultimately that desperation is a dysfunctional aspect of our
Wow.
relationship. In fact, in my mid 30s is when he confronted me with the question, Jason, am I a perfect father? And I said, yes. He said, well, then if there's dysfunction in our relationship, it's not on my end. The phrase Graham Cook gave me is a relationship where the son is desperate for the father is dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And so the shift in my life, and this is easy to speak to, you know, if I had my kids around the dinner table and you were with me, the food's on the table, but somehow there's desperation in them. They're desperately hungry. They're, you know, you'd say, what's wrong? Like there's food. If you followed me around the house and my kids were singing, and I am desperate for you, and it was true, like you'd say, what the heck is wrong? Like, you know, my kids don't need to be desperate for my affection. They don't need to be desperate for provision. Like as a good father, that is the last thing I want in our relationship. And so
Come on.
that was a major shift on my way to discovering union, where I realized there will no longer be desperation in our relationship. And so whenever it would pop its head up, I would step back and go, Father, show me who you are. And I wouldn't move until I saw him like Jesus saw him. You know, everything he has is mine. I'm already in his lap. There's no shadow of turning. And then, Father, show me how you see me. And you see me with the expanse of heaven at my back, with the kingdom. Everything you have is mine. And so you see me prone to love. If we're doing a callback, you see me in my true identity, and I can live there. And in that space, there is no desperation. So desperation is something we feel,
Hmm.
but it's a fractured way by which to interact. And I've eradicated that from my life, and I know you can speak to that, and yes, and that.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I love that story, the practicality of it. And you know how you mentioned, because I was a worship leader too, you know, and I remember those songs, and like you said, you would have tangible encounters with the Spirit of God.
Yeah,
But what I've learned in my journey, and I've seen it over and over again now, um, is that an encounter with God is not necessarily an endorsement of your method, but rather evidence of His love for you.
come on.
And so, you know, and that kind of makes the journey a little harder sometimes because it's like, but I experienced real, you know, whether we would call it breakthrough or encounter or whatever by engaging this method. And it's like, yes, but he was just waiting until you decided you had done enough, that you had
Yeah,
jumped through enough hoops in order to be able to embrace the encounter that he had just been standing there invitationally extending to us the whole time, you
come
know?
on. Yeah,
And I think for me, man, there's been nothing greater or more pivotal in my life to shift my theology than when I became a father. And I
yeah,
remember holding little Cinda, you know, she was just a couple of months old. And I looked down at her and she smiled at me for the first time. And like my heart was just overflowing. You know, I was like, this is like the coolest little creation in the world. Like,
right.
and our the way we feel about each other, even though her understanding is so infantile, is so amazing. And I remember just like all these thoughts that I had in my theology bubbling up. You know, this is 13 years ago,
Yeah,
and just like, man, there's no way that God can be who I've been taught that he was. If the context is a father and a son, a father and a child, you know. And so that really began to shift everything for me. And I'm so excited about the time that we're living in. You talked about how your kids already have, you know,
yeah,
the understanding of the good father. And I think about guys like George McDonald, you know, and we were chatting about him earlier, you know, and
yeah.
what must it have been like to hold the views of God that he held 100 years ago? And I feel like you and I and so many people that you've had on the Rethinking God with Tacos podcast and that we are in community with, I would say that we are pioneers of this movement towards the truth about the goodness of God, that God is good and only good. He's only ever been good and only ever been good in exactly the way Jesus revealed. I would
Wow.
say that we are pioneers. I would say that George MacDonald was a scout because pioneers travel into a new place to establish something. A scout is the individual that goes alone to check out that territory before the pioneers even make a break for it. And I'm so
Wow.
thankful for guys like him.
Yeah.
But what I'm also excited about is that the settlers follow pioneers. And sometimes we can hear settler as like with like a negative connotation or whatever. But no, settlers are the ones that come and develop
Infrastructure. Yeah.
ecosystems
Yeah.
and establish
Come
a
on.
sustainability in the territory that the pioneers have ventured into. And so like you said about your kids, like my daughter's so freaking funny, man. She cracks me up because she's only grown up with good father theology.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we'll be someplace, and she'll hear some bad theology or whatever, and like she'll just look over at me, kind of shake her little head, roll her eyes, because she's established in that place. It's all that she's ever known. She never had to deconstruct or detox from anything.
Right.
She just naturally has embraced the truth that's been presented to her. And so I'm like, man, what is the world going to look like when our kids are in their 40s, and
Right.
there's just an establishment of people camping around the truth of the true nature of God. It's going to be amazing.
Bro, I love that. What you're talking about is what I refer to as the long game.
Mm,
I think I love. We were talking about this earlier. The idea of scouts, pioneers, and settlers, and the infrastructure that comes with when when we when we get into our bones
mm,
that he's good and good as Jesus revealed and better than we can put our head around, right? Like my best thought about his goodness is but you know a whiff of air. It's but a breath. Uh,
well,
as to how good he truly is, and to live in that mystery, convinced, I mean, that's what faith is, right? To live in the mystery of his goodness, growing ever confident that it's beyond what we can understand. I, I, I think what you talked about earlier ties in here, and this is what's so encouraging uh, for George MacDonald, and it goes beyond George. But there are cycles and there are ways that we can kind of look at history and go, oh, I can see a shift taking place. What do they call them? Epochs, like
yeah.
these. I feel like we're there in one, and you don't know until you can look back. I realize, but I would. What George was chasing down was his goodness, as Jesus revealed, scouting out the goodness of God in a way where he's like, oh, it's not that. It's not what Jonathan Edwards is running at. Not to say that God can't use all things because he's in the long game. And this is where I'll throw back to what you were talking about. I was on staff at a Methodist church 10 years ago, and I was there for a season. I was the associate pastor. I was and went through a lot of things, but we were in the middle of what was going to become a church split. 600 people were going to go down the road with the worship leader. And the Sunday before he spoke, I finished my message. We had 3 services, and I finished my message at each service with everyone in this room is a spiritual giant. It was the prone to love message. I was literally speaking to our identity. Everyone in this room is a spiritual giant. The next week, the worship pastor got up and he ended each of his 3 services with literally a whip in his hand, because the message was called Now Get, and the whip was a representation of God using a whip to move big animals, and he'd whip it and say, Now get. I mean, that's the name of his sermon. And the last thing he said before he moved into the prayer time to get him to come up and say a prayer, the last thing he said was, there are no spiritual giants in this room.
Wow.
And so I sat in the front row of the first 2 services. I actually was on the front row of the third, but I moved to the back. the room, big room, holds 800 people. And so I'm in the back, it's dark. And one guy came up to me at one point, one of the associate pastors, and came up to me and said, "Hey, Jason, are you aware that he's saying the exact opposite of what you said?" I'm like, "Yeah, I picked up on it." And I'm in the back and I asked this question. I'm like, "God, why do you have me here? Like, why am I here?" And I was wrestling with what's the next step, and so much so that and I had to do this often in that church. I'd have to leave the service, go find a room, and just remind Father, who are you? Who am I? I'd do that, right? So I went and did that. It took about 5 minutes. I go back into the room in the back. He's still doing the altar call. I'd ask the question, Father, why am I here? What am I doing here? I walk into the room. I look over. I'm in the back. It's probably filled, so it's about 800 people in the back corner. I look over, and I swear it was like God highlighted him. It was like light from heaven was shining on a guy who had his arms out. He was crying, tears down his face, and it was profoundly obvious he was having an encounter with the love of God. And I looked at that, and in my mind, I thought, why the hell would you show up? And why would right now, with this crap theology coming from the stage, would you? And immediately my thought was, well, if you're here, then I can be here. So that settled
Wow.
the question for me because I just said, why am I here? I'm like, well, if you're here, I can be here. So that got settled. But the thing that went into my spirit, into my soul, is the long game of love that we're talking about, where I went, one encounter with his love connected to bad theology. Our Father thinks it's more important to have an encounter. He's not worried about the theology because he's in the long game. Yeah, that guy's going to have to unravel a whole lot of crap because of it'd be better if it came through a clear voice, 100%. But he probably wouldn't have been in that room. This is the beautiful thing about the gospel. That guy in that moment came to this service, probably heard me the week before, was a little bit confused, had an encounter with the Father through that crap theology, but God's in the long game. He's winning all the time. And so it was a huge shift for me. It took a whole lot of weight off of me to go, man, my job is just to reveal and to be a catalyst for an encounter with his affection. He's in the game of changing hearts and minds. And all of a sudden, I realized this is a generational long game. George has been doing it. We're talking about it happening in my family. You're passing it along to your kids just like I am. I'm excited about the days ahead. I'm excited about clean theology, about kingdom theology. I'm excited about the things that are happening, right? I'm excited about the season we're in. But what most excites me is that the God we serve, he won 2,000 years ago and before the foundations of the earth. And we just get to participate in it. So I don't know, man, we're in a sweet season.
Wow.
It's a beautiful season. I, I, let's talk about this.
Let's do it, man. I have a copy
Unless you have a
myself.
yes and look at that. I mean, I mean, the yes and, by the way, is taken from the idea that I love having people in my life where I say God is really this good, and I'm worried I'm going to offend them, and they're like, yes, and they
Right.
add to it, right? They bring. What about if he's this good? But bro, this thing right here, which by the way is a really good forward
It's
in
true.
this book.
Best
If you
part of
want,
the book, actually.
I mean, I'm glad you said that, but but I wasn't going to say it, but no, I'm totally kidding. But I was honored to write it and dive into our ministry is called a family story, and the reason it's a family story is because I awoke to the kingdom. Bill Johnson and Bethel brought me some good teaching 15 years ago about how Jesus only and always talked about his Father's kingdom,
Come on.
but he always talked about it in the context of a son speaking about his father in the context of friendship and family. And so our ministry is called a family story because if it isn't family, it isn't kingdom.
True.
And how beautiful to have you break this down, you and was Ryan and
Unica
Unica,
and Dr. Tony. Yep.
Dr. Tony. Um, yeah, just it's beautiful that we have this kind of stuff inviting us into good theology where you can get it faster. And tell me a little bit about this here, man. What was the catalyst
Amen.
for this book?
Appreciate that, man. the biggest issue to me was that I was unable to find like a streamlined resource that would address, the majority of the primary doctrines or theological ideas, all from the same foundation of a good, kind, loving Heavenly Father, and taking a kingdom perspective on it. And so, what is it about the king and his kingdom, his nature and his ways, that's all that Jesus preached about, 101 times just in the Gospels, 120 in some translations, right? That the kingdom of
Yeah.
God is like. And yet, when Holy Spirit came to me and asked me what the kingdom was, 13 years ago, I was like, I have no idea, because they didn't talk
Right.
about that in Bible college.
Right. Right.
A little bit of an
Strange.
issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I love about the kingdom and the king and his kingdom, his nature and his ways, is that once you encounter the truth of that, and you begin to get clarity on origin, identity, purpose, and destiny. Where did you come from? Who are you? What do you bring to the table? And what table is waiting for you to show up? That you cannot help but begin to make the world a better place. And I came from such a dismal theological perspective of, it's just getting darker out there and the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket, and just
Right.
try to get as many people as you can to pray the prayer before you die. And all of that into, well, hold on. If Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, therefore you go and teach and train people groups my way of doing things, like, shouldn't there be some transformation taking place? And so we have a saying in School of Kingdom that if you change your theology, you'll change the world.
Come
You
on.
can't help it. Once you know who he is, who you are, and what
Yeah.
his heart is for the world, it's impossible to not change it. And going all the way back to George MacDonald, when you look at the influence he had on C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, like his theology, and I mean, what percentage of the world knows those two names, but
Right.
doesn't know the name that influenced them?
Yeah.
But he's the one that brought them into that understanding of the true nature of the king. And when he did that, they released upon the earth such a beautiful, creative expression of the story of the kingdom in two different veins, that it truly has changed the world. And that's really where that kingdom reformer thing comes in. Obviously, origin, that's the Trinity.
Yeah.
Identity, Christology, as he is, so are we here in this world. Those are so huge. My personal assignment is on the kingship of the believer, introducing sons and daughters to their kingship, and then reformation of culture. How do we make the goodness of God accessible in tangible ways to humanity?
Yes.
And how do we do that as quickly as possible? I heard someone say, I can't remember who it was, or I'd give them credit, but the songwriter who will shape culture is not the one that pins the next great worship anthem, but rather the one that pins a love song of a generation. And that's so powerful to me, that understanding of the love of culture and the transformational power and love and authority that the kingdom brings to all of humanity, when we understand that framework, is super powerful. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, man, on, once we kind of get that union of us and the Trinity, then we also understand, man, the whole world is enveloped in the love of God. And there's such an opportunity to bring transformation culturally. And so, you've got the musician background, you've got this filmmaking thing going on. Like, talk to us about what it looks like to show up and transform culture with
I love
with good theology applied practically.
I love talking with you, man. I love the I think I explained and may have introduced you while you were there this way, but but if you and I are in a room, we both have the ability to help folks have an encounter and discover that they're loved. But then you tell them what to do. You actually you're like, hey, this is how we're gonna. And I'm like, I love it, because I love it in my own life, because I don't know that anyone's introduced me as a filmmaker until you and I just had this conversation, and it's a wildly risky thing from where I'm sitting to embrace, only because so much of my life has been connected to it, and I've got more rejection letters. I could paper an office with rejection letters. I'm a true artist in the sense that uh, I've I've run it. I've run it. I don't know if you the mountain. We got a better term for that, of entertainment.
Sphere. Yeah.
the sphere of entertainment. I know that's one of the terms that we've used, but that sphere of entertainment for really my whole adult life and even before. Started out as a singer-songwriter because I left Bible college and couldn't make the ministry suit fit. So, I always say I left Bible college and started a band, and not a Christian band, right? We've had that joke, that conversation. I had no interest in limiting myself to the rounded edges of their theological constructs so that we could somehow make crap art. Sorry, but strong opinions about
It's true though.
the type of creative limitations that would be placed on you in the church. The idea theologically was that we were creating a ship to survive the coming apocalypse, and
Right.
that filtered into our art as well. Everything had to fit into a small contained box, and so I didn't fit ever. And we played bars and clubs, and that was the first time I probably on my own got kicked out of a church. I went for covering because we played bars and clubs, and they said, "Yeah, you probably should find a new church." I was the worship pastor for the youth group, but had a band named Fringe. Chased that to its, chased that while I was in the midst of desperation, and
Mm.
so my identity was tied to that. God made me, and so that was my first cross season. That all came to a crashing halt when we had a record. Uh, be shelved, which was about $100,000 record, never saw the light of day, and the band ended, and that was my first cross, really truly cross, where I gave everything back to him, and then just he led me into union, and and from there, in the last 15 years, 20 years, music has become less of a day in day out, and I've begun to make films with my brother. And so we actually just came back from a proof of concept for a film that we're trying to sell either to Netflix or Angel Studios. And it's a film about the reforming of a family. But my favorite line in this film is, and this is talk about the liberty, right? If you're not navigating separation. My favorite line is there's an aunt and a niece, and they're in a library. They've just finally connected. The niece has lost her parents, the aunt, her brother and sister-in-law. It's a fresh wound, and the girl who's been at odds with the aunt finally is able to be vulnerable because we've taken the journey, right? And see, she gets vulnerable, and her phrase is, she says, "I'm angry all the time." She's talking to her aunt. "I'm angry all the time at you, the aunt, at mom and dad who've passed away, at God." And the aunt responds, "I haven't had faith in a long time." And then she says, "And I don't know how the goodness of God works, but I know what it looks like." And then she touches the girl's face and she says, "And it's beautiful."
Wow.
And it's the probably the shifting in this scene that invites us into the goodness of God, into the mystery that we're talking about, into the midst of maybe the darkest moment in their lives and the reforming of a family. And I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about the storytelling. Of course, I'm drinking from a fire hose. My brother's directing, and I'm working with him, co-directing with him, and that's kind of a more abstract, full picture of what we're into. I don't know that I spoke to anything theological in any profound sense, but I'm excited about. This isn't the only story I see being told. I am in this learning about this space. We've started a company. I think I can tell you by the time this comes out, deeplyrootedstories.com is where you can learn about it.
Wow.
We have 4 projects we're working on, but I feel like the more I learn about this industry, the more I see a shift taking place, some of the shackles coming off for creative storytellers to be able to actually tell stories again that we want to hear and that are transformative. And so I'm feeling like we're in the middle of a renaissance
Come on.
taking place in that area. And yeah, man, I'm leaning in. So I just talked a lot, and basically need you to take the reins now.
No, man, it's so intriguing, and I'm excited about everything that you're doing in that space. Um, I think it was the Bish, TD Jakes back in the day said that if Jesus was alive today, he would probably be a filmmaker. And I think that's true because nothing can captivate and pull someone in, keep someone's attention and communicate a truth like a really good movie. And I love that you're having the ability to do it, in such a format that it can be pitched to Netflix.
Yeah.
I either didn't have the freedom or the balls to just be just a good rapper. So I was a Christian rapper back in the day, and that's one of my
All right.
greatest regrets, because
We've talked about this.
keeps you in a box, and there's all this nonsense tied to it. I too was had to exit a church because I dared to play a bar for a charity event for a friend who had passed away from cancer,
Oh,
and I was doing Christian music, but
God
they were
forgive us, man. Oh my
having
God.
none of it.
Right?
But those boxes of religiosity are people are quickly becoming they're over it. And I see
Yeah.
the cultural construct of what we might call church. In the kingdom, there's the body. And we've created this cultural construct called church that's just kept people hemmed in. But people are breaking out of the box, and it's such an exciting time. And I believe that the more that we see an agendaless, an agendaless infiltration of the goodness of God in all aspects of culture and society, man, this is just going to keep picking up steam. And I'm excited about it, man.
Hey guys, I hope the podcast is blessing. Family Stories, our nonprofit, started 10 years ago. The goal was to make media content catalytic for an encounter with the love of God, and I think we're doing it. Had no idea what that would all entail, and in the last year has been blown away by what's happened around this podcast. Rethinking God with Tacos. The community that's gathered, the relationships and friendships that have been made, the conversations that have been had, the impact has been actually quite profound in our lives. And I'm daily hearing from folks who have been encouraged because of the conversations being had. Catalytic for an encounter with the love of God. Listen, we're listener supported. And as this thing has grown, it's taken a little bit more of my time I love to give. And we've also had folks come along to help, and I'm so grateful for that. But it all works because you guys partnering with us and giving. And so I'm grateful for those who have partnered in that way, incredibly grateful. And in inviting you who are watching this now, if you've been impacted, if this has blessed you, and, you'd like to see it continue to improve and expand, I'd invite you to give. You can go to afamilystory.org, afamilystory.org. We're a nonprofit, and so you can give there. You can also sign up for our mailing list, keep up with us, all things tacos, all things A Family Story, conferences, new books, Zoom calls, all of the amazing ways by which we're connecting, the Facebook community. So thankful for you guys. Familystory.org. Sign up for our mailing list. Partner with us by giving, and we'll continue to have those conversations that are hopefully like the one you're listening to now, catalytic for an encounter with our Father's affection. All right, guys, back to the podcast. Love you. See you soon. I mean, I think that comes back again to this long game that we're in. So many would be able to resonate with, I did Christian music, I did Christian therapy, I did, Christian business. Remember Kingdom Business?
Mm-hmm.
Remember that thing that happened 10 years ago? I mean, if you're a son and a daughter, all business is kingdom, right?
Come on, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I get it. We're trying to put language around it. We're trying to get free of the restraints of separation, which is the foundation of all religion, right? All religion ultimately is about separation and control.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's a fascinating thought that Jesus would have been a filmmaker. I like that thought because he was a storyteller, and
Yeah.
and he was brilliant at giving you the story and letting you interpret.
Come on.
under trusting that the gospel was in the story. Again, trusting in that. Well, I'll legalize it by using scripture, right? Although we're talking about my model of all things has shifted to this. It's the parable of the sower. Once upon a time, in the context of separation, the parable of the sower was about how filthy and horrible I am.
Hmm.
And you would read it in the context of separation, and it was kind of a hopeless story, because if I am the soil, there's odds that are against me, like, because 75% of soil sucks.
Right.
That's how I'd read it, right? Like, it was like, God help me be good soil today because I screwed it up yesterday. Like, 75% of soil doesn't actually produce anything. And the way that we were taught to read that was, if he's the sower, we're the soil. And if we're the soil, and let's read it in that context. But if he is the sower, then let's read it now in the context of union, where love, or other-centered self-giving, reconciling love, reconciling the world to himself, not counting our poor soil against us, is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Then what's happening is the love is a measureless revelation, and he's sowing it willy-nilly, as though he has a measureless amount of seed. And all of a sudden you realize, what kind of farmer sows on poor soil? Oh, a farmer who's convinced that the seed is more powerful than the soil. The seed has transformative realities. And if you sow it on a path, even before the birds can scoop it up, it's had impact on the path. It's fractured it up. The birds even poop it out. They're actually participating in the economy of his affection, and it changes the nature of the path until it's rocky. Falls on rocky soil, he's happy about that too, because he's got measureless seed. He's pouring it everywhere,
Come on.
willy-nilly, right? So it falls on the rocky path. Yeah, it grows up, but the roots, there's too much, so it dies. But that's all right, because the seed is more powerful and transformative, and it changes that into weedy soil, and now everything grows. And yeah, the weeds choke it out, but once again, the seed is transformative in the nature of soil, until you have soil that bears 90, 60, 30 fold. It's a exponential revelation. And so this is the kingdom we're talking about. This is the liberty then that we get to participate in the arts. I'm sowing, and I'm sowing, not worried about the soil. It can land anywhere. I'm partnering with the seed, the
Yeah.
incorruptible seed that you sow into soil, all types of soil, knowing that, just like the poor theology that it came through from the pulpit for that guy that's having an encounter, the seed is more powerful than the soil. It brings us into to a place of freedom and liberty to be able to live fully in who we are. Because what you're talking about, it's risky for me to say, filmmaker, because we've tried to get this film actually got optioned and got paid for 5 years ago. It didn't get made. It may not get made now, but we're just going to keep sowing the seed, this incorruptible seed, going to continue to be fully who we are and endeavor to be faithfully Jason, because nobody can be Jason better than me. And if I can live in that place with the confidence that the seed is what it's about, an encounter with his affection that will transform us, man, then I get up in the morning and all I got to do is become more confident in his affection today, right? I get to live from that place. I mean,
Come
that's the stuff, man. That's why we can smile when we hear something that's not true. When we hear, I'm sending my daughter to YWAM, and people are reaching out and going, careful. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, there's bad theology everywhere. I got bad theology still. YWAM, we all got bad theology. But she's the missionary. Like,
on. Let's
right?
go.
Like, she's a powerful daughter. She knows who she is. And, is there spiritual abuse in places and you're worried about that? Yeah, that's all real. That's so real. But when you know who you are and you know whose you are, and you have your people around you, and we're growing in that area, then you're the missionary. You need to partner, be part of the seed, and so I'm not worried about it.
Come on.
So.
I love that, man. It reminds me of, I remember the first day that I took Cinda to kindergarten. And, ever since, all the way back to that story when I was holding her and she smiled at me a couple of months old, I would just always look at her and I would tell her all the things that I loved about her.
Come on.
Cinda, I love that you are this and that, and just began to instill identity into her before she could comprehend. And so I was taking her to drop her off for the first day of kindergarten. And I'd walked up to the door and I realized she wasn't beside me. And so I turned and looked behind me, and she was a few paces back. She had her little backpack on. She was holding the straps and she was just standing there. And so I took a few steps back and got down on one knee and I was like, "What's up, Cinda?" And she was like, "Dad, I'm scared." And I said, "Cinda, what I love about you is you're brave. What I love about," and she goes, "Got it, Dad." And she pushed me out of the way and opened up the door and walked in her own self. And I realized in that moment, I had been building this library in her heart of identity. And all I had to do is touch one word on one
Come
page,
on.
and she remembered who she was. And
Come
she
on.
remembered, "Oh, yeah, I'm the powerful one walking in here."
Come
And
on.
man,
Come on, bro.
you didn't raise little kingdom ambassadors like our daughters is pretty awesome, man. I'll venture to say YWAM will not know what hits it when Eva shows up.
And that's I love YWAM. It's,
Oh yeah,
but it's that fear, and good reason. We've all got our wounds. We've all been hurt, like you said, we all tried to fit the box of Christian music for a minute, right?
yeah.
Like we've all got our traumas and our triggers and our broken places, and you and I could go on all day about the hypocrisy within the particular church that we love, and the waves that we either enjoy making or we make either way. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Facts.
let's take an axe to the root of that religious thought. But I love that identity piece, pouring into our kids, pouring into each other. I love the community that you're part of even now with the tacos and us with School Kingdom, and I see that kind of thing happening because you do need that person to go, hey, you're brave. You do need that person in your life to speak to you. We need each other, and it's a beautiful thing though that the Scout McDonald um, uh, provided for some pioneers to lean into a way by which to settle, to create infrastructures and culture.
Well,
Here we are, man, full circle.
man, everything's changing. The world's
Yeah,
getting better, and we
yeah,
get to be a part of that, and it's pretty amazing.
it is.
So, for the School Kingdom community, I'd love for you to the first book of yours that I ever got, and I'm an audio guy, so me and the girls were going up to Colorado, and I got Leaving and Finding Jesus, the audio. Boom, right there.
I
Yes.
brought it, man. There it is.
Come on. I love that book. And we all listened to it as a family to and from Colorado. Cinda goes, we were about 2 hours into it. And Cinda goes, "He's dropping the heavy revy, but his voice is so soothing. I like it." I was like, what are you trying to say about how I drop heavy revy? She's not soothing, Dad. I was like, fair enough. But she's a big fan of your delivery and voice, as am I.
It's
But
awesome.
I'd love for you to share with the School of Kingdom audience a little bit about that book, the story of it, and what they can find in its pages, man, because it's so good.
Yeah, real quick, and we've been hitting on some of the themes in this conversation. I actually write about the incorruptible seed and the sower at one point in the book, but the shortest, well, we don't have to do it short, but Leaving and Finding Jesus takes an Emmaus Road approach to rethinking God.
Come
To
on.
rediscovering, the Emmaus Road is Jesus showing up incognito to people who know him, but had he shown up in a way that was recognizable, their head would have gotten in the way of the revelation of who he was, the greater revelation of resurrection life, of the fact that there is no shadow of turning. And he was after the burning heart, and he encountered them head, heart, body, physically, right? Heart, soul, mind, strength on the road, but he did it hidden. He did it hidden so their head wouldn't get in the way of the burning. We know this because when they got in the house, they brought him in. They brought they wouldn't let the stranger, by the way, because they didn't know it was Jesus, but they recognized something about him. This is on the day of his resurrection, by the way. Like these are the first people that actually get to put it all together. And they're in the house. He breaks the bread. Their eyes are open. They see what was always there. That's what revelation is. It's always been there. We just get to
Wow.
see it, and their eyes are open. Boom, revelation. It was a good message on the road, but would have gone sideways. They could have started an itinerant ministry around what they heard on the road, but it would have gone sideways because knowledge puffs up. In the house, it's revelation. It's intimate, and they had a revelation of the resurrected Christ. he disappears from their sight again, and they say, did not our hearts burn within us when he spoke to us on the road? We knew in our burning heart, our head just caught up. That's how it works. That's the stewarding of relationship. And so it's an Emmaus Road approach to rediscovering Jesus. And the title came from a conversation I had. I was writing a book. I've ghostwritten and helped people write their memoirs. I was ghostwriting for an athlete, a three-time Olympian, uh, uh, intense personality. And one of our early conversations, as I'm getting to know her, and often when you write with someone, you're helping them dive into the painful years and process the broken places in their faith. And she was in the midst of an existential crisis around her faith. She had taken her understanding of God to its conclusion, and she was burned out with trying to get closer to God. That's the short version of it. And so the conversation was 2 hours long, and within 3 minutes, with a whole lot of intense language, she'd let me know she's leaving Jesus. I'm leaving Jesus, she says. And I knew to be quiet. I'm far enough along in the journey to know that when someone's drowning, you let them wear themselves out. Every once in a while you get close enough you get a punch in the nose. You go, all right, let's let them work this out. And so I just listened, and she made, like a lawyer, a brilliant case for why to leave Jesus. All the disappointments, all the ways she'd been hurt by the church, all the things she'd tried to do to get closer to him, and still he wasn't doing what she wanted him to do. He wasn't answering the questions. She didn't get all of the desperate ways by desperation, all the desperations that she'd brought to God, all of her desperate attempts to get into his lap, all of her desperate attempts to feel peace, to feel righteousness, to feel joy, the kingdom. And hour and a half goes by, and into a 2-hour conversation, she's worn out, she's done, and she comes full circle like a lawyer, makes her case again. I'm leaving Jesus. And when she pauses, now she's waiting for me to talk her out of it, give her something she can work to, something she hasn't already worked to its ultimately lacking conclusion, right? She's looking for some other piece. She's an athlete. She knows how to work this stuff. She knows how to put the work in better than almost anybody you could imagine. This woman is intense, right? So give me something, coach. Tell me something else I can do, because I've met Jesus. I know he's real, but I somewhere along the way, separation has come between us. That bad theology has worn me out. She says, I'm leaving Jesus, and she's waiting for me to give her something. And my response is, you absolutely should leave Jesus, which made her angry. She spun out again for about 5 minutes, but she came back to like a threat. I'm leaving Jesus. This time I said, 100%, you should leave Jesus. I left that Jesus a long time. I said, you should leave Jesus. He's killing you. I left that Jesus a long time ago. And at that point, she was ready to listen. And we began to talk about a Jesus that doesn't have any shadow of turning, a Jesus of which the work is already completed, a Jesus that is burning in her heart. And she knew that was real, but she didn't know how to get past the fractured lies of separation and all the earning. And we began to talk about that Jesus that isn't hierarchical, the Jesus that doesn't participate in separation, the Jesus that is not a punisher, but is a reconciliation. The Jesus that transforms us through his kindness, a Jesus that is merciful. And these are the conversations we had over the coming weeks. And then of course, I grabbed that story and thought, man, that is a great story to introduce the Emmaus Road Jesus, who's going to walk with you to reveal himself to you, and he'll hide and let you say things like, we thought he was the one, right? We thought he was the one, is what they said to the Emmaus Road Jesus. He was just infinitely better than you had thought. And that is the journey that every one of us is on, that we've all discovered. And so, yeah, that's the book. We go into justice, we go into hell, we go into hermeneutics, how to approach scripture, all the Jesuses I've left the literal, inerrant, a biblical hermeneutic and turn to a Christocentric hermeneutic, a God in Christ reconciled. So we go through kind of it's my book for those who are and reconstructing on the cornerstone that is Jesus. And so we kind of run at some of the hard stuff right? It's not hard stuff when you discover there is no shadow of turning. It's just hard understanding. And so we take some of the fractures on our God lens, and we leave a whole lot of Jesus is only to discover the Emmaus Road. Jesus is walking beside us. He will never leave us. He's constantly revealing himself to us. And so that's the short, long version of that book. Yeah.
Wow, so good. Can't recommend it highly enough. And then also, in addition to that, you've got the Rethinking God with Tacos podcast and the Facebook group, which has been an amazing, super kind community for people who are processing through that. And time again, I see people posting there about like, man, like I'm really leaning into this revelation of the goodness of God and consubstantiality or any of these things. And, they're experiencing some blowback from concerned people around them, and so especially in the time that we're in where I know a lot of people that live in pretty good sized towns and they have nobody they can talk to or journey with in this process. But this has been a beautiful community for that. And then the conversations that you have on the podcast are extremely powerful, thought-provoking, bold, unapologetic, and I appreciate all of that. But yeah, so tell the people where they can get your books, where they can jump on the Facebook group, the podcast, all that goodness.
All right. Yeah. So afamilystory.org is our website. That's our ministry. We're a nonprofit, familystory.org. That's where we host the podcast, Rethinking God with Tacos. Rethinking God with Tacos is the name for the group on Facebook. So if you type that in, you'll find us, join us. You're there. We're having lots of fun conversations. You can also find us on Instagram. All of my socials are at Jason Clark is. And let's do this though, man. Because we're doing this twofer, we got to talk tacos and we got to talk about where we're going to find you. Let me tell this story. We've traveled some together, and here's the upside for having a podcast with tacos in the title. I love tacos. I really do. I almost could eat them every day, but not every day. And but everywhere I go, because we have that podcast, people want to take me out to tacos, which is a win, man. Always a win. But we were traveling and we'd done 3 days in a row, and the host of the last location reached out to us and said, "Hey," and we were with Matthew Hester and we were traveling, and they said, "Hey, we got great tacos in town, but I'm betting you guys maybe don't want tacos." Before I could respond, you and Matthew were both like, "Good Lord, no more tacos."
Thanks. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that tour was, I think I was on the road about almost a month,
Yeah.
around 4 weeks. And I went back and counted, and there was only 6 days without tacos on that. So many tacos, bro.
My gosh, man, that's awesome. So you got lots of taco stories, but that's one of the ways we end the podcast is a taco story, a particular taco you love, or maybe a bad taco experience. I'm all right with that. What do you got, man?
Yeah, so I've got to give my wife a shout out, man, because she found this recipe for birria street tacos, and so she has this chuck roast that she throws in the crock pot early in the morning with some sort of magical seasoning that I know not of, and by the end of the day, she's got the corn tortillas, and she throws that meat in there with some cheese, and then she fries them on I just drooled a little bit. Fries them on a skillet in some butter, and oh my goodness, man!
Come on,
it's freaking unbelievable. So I got to go with the homemade tacos for this story, man.
I love it, and I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's birria, or something like that. Because someone called in once and said, "Hey, you're pronouncing it like a white guy."
At this moment, I'm sure that I just did as well.
I know that's why I did it, because I was like, I know that if she's listening, she's like, guys, but I don't know how to roll my R's.
Sorry.
No. But I'm with you. Hey, we did share tacos. We had these little bite size. Were they ahi tacos or were they duck taco? I think they were ahi.
They were ahi. Yeah. What is it? The tuna poke wonton miniature tacos at Beauty and Essex in Las Vegas.
Yeah, those were good.
Pretty good.
Those were good too. If we're going to talk about tacos we've shared, how do people find you, bro? I know for those who are listening to the Rethinking God with Tacos podcast.
Yeah, so School of Kingdom on YouTube. That's where you'll find this show and other resources. And then let's see, dubbalexander.com. That's where you'll find information on the upcoming, any of the tours, but especially this one coming up with you and myself going to Australia. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then we've got a free intro to the Kingdom 101 course parked at kingdomintro.com. And so if people want some, just some heavy revy talking about the garden reality and how Jesus reversed all the effects of the fall and what's available to us now, then that'd be a good place to plug in.
I can't recommend it enough. Also, the Joe Kingdom perspective.
That's true. Yes, that's where the podcast, myself, Ryan Pena, Dr. Tony, we cut loose a little bit and just share a kingdom perspective on clips from the Joe Rogan Experience, which is one of my favorite podcasts. So we have a lot of fun in there. That podcast is not for the easily offended, heads up, but I don't think either of our audiences have easily offendable people. So we're all good on that.
Yeah, I think we're fine. I love it, man. Bro, this is I love it. I love connecting with you. I love diving into the goodness of God together, and honored to be on the School of Kingdom podcast, and happy to have you. This is your second. Actually, you've co-hosted with me as well, but at this point, folks are real comfortable with who you are through our podcast. So love it, man.
Yes, sir. Always a good time, man. Appreciate you, bro. Love everything you're bringing to the table, and expecting big things with the filmmaking career, bro. And I'm excited about it. And so, hey, to the King, my friends. We'll catch y'all next time.
Love it. Hey, guys. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, myself, or our guests, you can go to afamilystory.org. You can also go to afamilystory.org if you'd like to give. This is a listener-supported podcast, and we are incredibly grateful for your generosity. Hey, we have a Facebook group, and it's pretty cool. Rethinking God with Tacos. You can join us over there. Lots of incredible conversation and community taking place on that page. And you can also follow us on all the socials, Instagram, YouTube, and others. Hey, I'd love it also if you went on iTunes and left a review, or shared or tweeted or liked the podcast. Let your friends know that this is a good place to hear about the love of God. I pray grace and wonder over your day.